Chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas for 5 minutes, Mr. McCaul.
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank all three of you for your service. As Mr. Katko mentioned, I know it's not an easy job, and I chaired this committee, back in the day. And I want to, in my position, being a leader now in foreign affairs, with the collapse of Afghanistan, what I've seen is a rise in our foreign nation adversary states and the threat, quite honestly. And the way it was done with the Taliban in charge of the evacuation, in charge of Kaya, a suicide bomber coming in and killing 13 servicemen and women, leaving Americans behind, leaving Afghan partners behind, getting Afghans on the planes that shouldn't have been on the airplanes that got into the United States because it was so chaotic. Now, that doesn't really fall into either of y'all's jurisdiction. Perhaps Secretary Mayorkas, to the extent of the screening coming in from the planes. But then we saw Putin invade Ukraine. And now we see a rising China, communist China threatening Taiwan. We see an Ayatollah close to a nuclear bomb. And Kim Jong-un is firing rockets off, again, now over Japan. I argue that the world's getting more dangerous, and I know that you're more domestic, but you have to look at the world and the threats, and it's a worldwide threat hearing to determine, can those threats get into the homeland? That's always been the question, whether it be through ports and airports, which is the more typical way they do this, or what worries me now is the situation at the border. The fact that it is wide open, and the combination of the Taliban taking over, Mr. Haqqani, a wanted terrorist, being their Minister of Interior, now Minister really of Security is what he is, harboring al-Zawahiri, who is bin Laden's top lieutenant, in his own house. And I applaud the administration for targeting him and taking him out, but we don't have eyes and ears anymore. We've lost access to Bagram, and now China's in there with the lithium, and we'll probably get access to Bagram, that being the end result. My question is, maybe to the director of the FBI, what is your concern about the threat combination of this unmanaged, wide-open border situation and the threat from al-Qaeda and ISIS coming out of Afghanistan, not to mention the fentanyls and all the other bad stuff? And then lastly, the terror watch list, as I understand there are 98 of them. When I was chair of this committee, we would get briefed on those individuals, not just the numbers. It's my understanding this committee is not getting the full briefing on who are these people that have attempted to get into the United States, much less the ones that already have. Director Wray?
Well, Congressman, you raised a number of, I think, very legitimate and important issues. When it comes to the border in particular, it is a very significant and important challenge. There's a whole wide array of criminal threats that come in terms of drugs, money, guns, violence, and you mentioned some of that in your comments. There's also, of course, a concern from a national security perspective. Any port of entry is a possible vector that a terrorist organization could choose to exploit. Now, historically, foreign terrorist organizations have not chosen illegal immigration as the way to seed operatives, as they've usually preferred to either recruit somebody here or send somebody in legally just because of the risks. Right. But we have seen, over the last 5 years, an increase in the number of KSTs who've been encountered, who've attempted to cross. And so that is obviously something we remain very concerned about. And you may have seen early summer, we announced the indictment of an individual who was trying to bring foreign nationals in a plot to kill former President Bush.
And thanks for bringing that up. That was one other thing. My time's getting ready to expire, but I guess the point for this committee to really evaluate the threat, to respond on a policy basis, we don't know who these 98 people are, where they're from. We don't really have any identifying information. to know who they are, where they're coming from, what was their motivation to get into the United States. And so I would ask it that maybe, Mr. Chairman, that I think this committee, when I was chair and you're ranking member, we got that information.
Yes, and we will proceed to get it this time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from Rhode Island.